Spectrovision Radio.
There are few places on Earth quite like Ireland. It's a land where myth and mystery intertwine. A land of ancient stone circles and mist-covered hills, where stories of the unseen world have been passed down for generations. Long before the modern age, the people of Ireland spoke of strange visitors arriving from the skies. They told tales of glowing lights drifting across lakes, of phantom ships racing silently through the night, and of powerful beings who could travel between worlds. Some called them the Tuatha De Danann, or people of the goddess Danu. Others spoke of fairies, spirits, or travelers from the other world. But today, we might call them something else: UFOs and aliens. Throughout Ireland's long history, witnesses have reported strange aerial phenomena that seem to blur the line between folklore and modern mystery. From ancient legends of flying wheels to unexplained radar contacts, to commercial airline pilots encountering objects moving at impossible speeds, high above the ocean. The Emerald Isle may be known for its music, its history, and its rich mythology. But hidden among these stories is another tradition, one that asks a far stranger question. What exactly has been flying over Ireland for centuries? On this week's episode, in celebration of St. Patrick's Day, we're traveling to one of the most mysterious places on Earth to explore these strange stories of lights, unexplained encounters, and the enduring legends over this magical and mystical land. I'm Ryan Sprague, and this is UFOs over Ireland.
While our government's official position is not to speculate on this subject, we can choose to let our minds explore other possibilities, to use our imaginations. For if we consider that astroscientists agree on one point, that the possibility of life elsewhere is not only quite probable, some feel it is there without a doubt. Let us suppose then that these objects are real space vehicles, extraterrestrial in origin, and not an illusion of the mind.
I'm Ryan Sprague, and you are now somewhere in the skies. One of the strangest figures in Irish mythology is a druid known as Mag Ruath, whose name roughly translates to servant of the wheel. Medieval texts describe him as a powerful sorcerer who lived on Valencia Island in County Kerry and possessed immense knowledge and supernatural abilities. According to Irish folklore, Mag Ruath owned a mysterious device called the Roth Ramach, often translated as the Oared Wheel. The descriptions of this object are remarkable. It was said to be circular in shape and capable of flying through the air. Some accounts claim that the wheel could unleash destructive energy, striking down enemies or devastating entire battlefields. Stories about Mag Ruath place him across vast stretches of time. Some accounts say he traveled as far as the Middle East, where he supposedly participated in events connected to biblical history. Other traditions portray him as living thousands of years earlier, serving ancient kings and wielding powers that bordered on the supernatural. What makes the Roth Ramach so fascinating is its resemblance to modern descriptions of flying saucers. It is repeatedly described as a circular object capable of flight, controlled by a mysterious operator, and associated with immense energy. So for those who study UFOs, the imagery is strikingly familiar. Whether Maud Ruith was a purely mythical figure, or whether the legend preserves an ancient memory of unusual aerial phenomena, remains unknown. But the idea of a flying wheel appearing in Irish tradition centuries before the age of aircraft raises an intriguing possibility. Perhaps encounters with mysterious objects in the skies are far older than we might think. In the early years of the 20th century, a series of unusual sightings began to emerge from Lake Gur in County Limerick, one of Ireland's most historically and archaeologically rich landscapes. Lake Gur is no ordinary lake. The area surrounding it is filled with ancient stone circles, prehistoric dwellings, and burial mounds that date back thousands of years. For centuries, the lake has been a focal point of Irish folklore, with stories of hidden realms and supernatural beings said to dwell beneath its waters or within the nearby hills. It was within this already mystical setting that residents began reporting something strange unfolding. According to locals, the phenomenon typically appeared during a calm summer evening when the surface of the water was perfectly still. On these types of quiet nights, observers claimed to see glowing boats suddenly materialize on the water. These vessels did not approach from the shoreline or emerge from behind the hills. Instead, they seemed to appear almost instantly, as though fading into existence from the darkness itself. Those who witnessed the phenomenon described the boats as moving with astonishing speed. Rather than drifting like ordinary vessels, these craft would glide rapidly across the lake in straight lines, sometimes racing from one end of the water to the other in moments. Their motion appeared smooth and controlled, far faster than any rowboat could possibly travel. Despite their movement across the water, the lake remained eerily quiet. Witnesses consistently reported seeing 4 boats traveling together in formation. Each boat appeared to carry 3 occupants. 2 figures would sit at the front, rowing in synchronized motions, while a 3rd figure stood or sat at the rear steering the vessel. Yet the most unsettling detail described by witnesses was the complete absence of sound. Although the oars appeared to strike the water and propel the boats forward, no splashing or rowing noises could ever be heard. These accounts were eventually recorded by the American anthropologist Walter Evans Wentz, who traveled through Ireland collecting folklore and testimonies for his influential 1911 work, The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries. While documenting traditions around Lake Gur, Evans Wentz encountered several individuals who claimed to have personally witnessed the phantom boats. They insisted that the phenomenon occurred repeatedly and could be observed under the right conditions during certain times of the year. For the people living around Lake Gur, the explanation seemed pretty obvious. Many believed the boats belonged to the fairy folk, supernatural beings said to inhabit Ireland's hidden otherworld. According to local belief, the lake was a gateway between these realms, and the strange vessels were simply glimpses of that unseen world, briefly crossing into our own. Yet when modern researchers examine these accounts, they often note the striking similarities to contemporary UFO sightings. The glowing appearance, the silent motion, the sudden appearance and disappearance. All of these elements seem to echo many modern reports of UFOs. Whether these witnesses were observing atmospheric phenomena, optical illusions, or something truly unexplained remains uncertain. But the stories of the phantom boats of Lake Gur continue to linger as one of Ireland's most curious early accounts of mysterious objects moving silently through the night. Across the rugged countryside of Ireland, particularly in its more quiet and rural regions. People have long spoken of mysterious glowing lights that appear after dark, often referred to as spook lights. These strange illuminations have been reported for generations, flickering across bogs, fields, and lonely roads with no obvious source. Witnesses typically describe small floating orbs or lights that hover silently in the air before drifting away or just suddenly vanishing. While many of these sightings are brief and elusive, the consistency of descriptions across decades has made these lights a lasting feature of Irish folklore and unexplained phenomena. One of the most frequently discussed areas for such sightings is the countryside surrounding Durrow, where locals have reported glowing lights moving slowly over fields. These lights are often described as pale, yellow, bluish, or white, and sometimes appear to follow roads or waterways before disappearing into the distance. Witnesses claim that the lights occasionally seem to react to movement, hovering in place or drifting away when approached. Though some observers initially assume they're distant lanterns, aircraft lights, or even reflections from vehicles, their erratic motion and silent hovering often defy easy explanation.
I did see them lights, when I was a youngster, but I was scared, you know what I mean? I'd be scared, I used to even go on my tippy toes when I was a youngster. It'd be this house. It was supposed to be haunted.
Yeah.
And they tell you, when you go around, to those old farmers' place and that, for winter's evening and that. Oh, they got so-and-so will be back tonight. This is their birthday. They're dead now 20-odd years,
Yeah.
Today is their birthday. They'll be back. And just I'd be going home, along by that house, and I go on my tippy toes, I'm thinking that they're alive in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nearly 20 years ago, I wasn't living around here. I was living down in a place called Roadside, Hallamstown. And my wife, God rest her, was with me that time. I had a little girl. And I used to go out of a Sunday night, like down Forest Cammers for a drink. So this night I went out and I took out the car. And I come around the corner of the house. And I was looking out up over Carrickburn, I guess I thought. I see this big ball of fire in the sky. And it was real low, and I said, watching it. And I said, watching it, for surely I did for a good 10 minutes. And it was moving on, and it was as big as a balloon now, maybe. But it moved away way out over Cammers, on out that way. And which is, I thought, wherever I went, I thought it went down. So I put no more pass on it, but I didn't tell my wife on it because she might be nervous and maybe I mightn't get to go for the drink. But about 2 months after, or it could be 3 months, I was going out one night and my wife's cousin was in. I had proof of it this time, you see. I went out and I looked and I seen it was coming the very same way. And I called them all out. And they seen it the same as what I did. And it was going the very same direction. A big ball of fire, red as blood. And I went on the very, very same direction. We watched it, and I went, and which is we thought, it went down again. And I don't know what it ever was.
Many researchers and folklorists have connected Ireland's spook lights to the ancient tradition of will-o'-the-wisp, sometimes known in Ireland as fairy lights. In traditional Irish folklore, these glowing orbs were believed to be supernatural guides or tricksters that appeared near marshes or boglands, leading travelers astray.
Will-o'-the-wisp now, he'd lead you astray. He'd come in the form of a light. And you're following the light. Now that time there was no lights or anything along the roads. Everything was completely pitch dark. And you followed the light and he'd lead you astray and you'd have to stay wherever you were all night, wherever he'd lead you to. The next morning till it get bright and you see where you were. I haven't heard tell of will-o'-the-wisp, but did indeed.
Wisp, yeah. And in the winter time you'd see this big ball of fire that round about that size. And it goes all and all, up and down and right across one end of it, up to here, I'd see him in the night, yeah. And they said it was some kind of a bird, was it? No, it wasn't a bird. It's something that come out of a bog. It was something to do with whatever was in the bog, I think. But there's a ball high on it. And it would go round and round and round. Wouldn't be up very high. And it travelled across the bog. I don't know how far. It must have went away up, maybe up to Edenville or somewhere. I don't know where it went. Yeah.
Such stories date back centuries and were deeply intertwined with Ireland's cultural belief in the Side, or fairy folk, who were thought to inhabit ancient landscapes and burial mounds. The appearance of strange lights was sometimes interpreted as evidence of these unseen presences moving through the night. Modern explanations often focus on natural phenomena. Scientists have suggested that combustible gases released from decaying vegetation in wetlands can ignite and produce faint floating flames, while others propose atmospheric electrical effects or distant vehicle headlights distorted by temperature inversions. Yet many of these reports continue to puzzle investigators, because the lights often move in ways that appear intelligent or even controlled, whether a natural optical illusion, a chemical reaction in marshland air, or something just fully not yet understood. Ireland's spook lights remain one of the island's most enduring and eerie mysteries, hovering somewhere between science, folklore, and the unexplained. Ireland's first modern UFO wave traces back to the 1950s, when a series of unusual aerial encounters were reported across the remote northern county of Donegal. At the time, Donegal was, and still remains, one of the most sparsely populated regions in all of Ireland. Its rugged coastline faces the open seas, and its rural interior is dominated by mountains, bogland, and small farming communities. In the years following the Second World War, the skies above Donegal were relatively quiet, free from the heavy traffic seen elsewhere in Europe. This isolation made an unusual object in the sky particularly noticeable. Throughout the decade, fishermen along the Atlantic coast began describing strange lights appearing above the ocean at night. These lights were often reported as glowing spheres or bright white orbs that seemed to hover motionless above the water before suddenly accelerating away. Some witnesses claimed the objects moved silently across the sky before vanishing beyond the horizon, while others reported that the lights appeared to descend toward the ocean and then rise again moments later. Because many of the sightings occurred late at night or in the early hours of the morning, fishermen returning from their boats were often among the first to witness these. Farmers living further inland soon began reporting similar experiences. Residents described seeing bright objects drifting slowly over fields and hills before suddenly shooting upward at tremendous speeds. The sightings often lasted only for a few moments, but the unusual movements left a strong impression on those who witnessed them. In small towns where neighbors knew each other fairly well, the stories began to spread quickly, and it became clear that people in different areas were describing the same thing. One of the most widely discussed sightings during this period reportedly occurred near Mount Errigal, the tallest peak in County Donegal. Several witnesses claimed to have seen a luminous object descending from the night skies and hovering above the mountainside. The object was described as intensely bright and cylindrical in shape, casting an eerie glow across the surrounding landscape. According to observers, the craft remained suspended in the air for several minutes, completely still, as if silently observing the land beneath it. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the object accelerated upward and disappeared out of sight. Local newspapers eventually began reporting the sightings, though coverage was cautious. Journalists suggested possible explanations such as atmospheric conditions, distant aircraft, or astronomical phenomena. Yet the witnesses remained convinced that what they saw could not be explained so easily. To them, the lights behaved too deliberately, too intelligently, and couldn't be dismissed as simple natural occurrences. Even decades later, the Donegal sightings of the 1950s are still remembered as Ireland's first significant wave of modern UFO encounters. Strange lights and even craft that have never been explained. In October of 1969, the quiet countryside of Mullaghorn in County Tipperary became the setting for a remarkable UFO sighting. On a calm autumn evening, longtime residents John and Kathleen Shelley reported witnessing an object hovering silently above the surrounding fields.
And how far away from it where were you from it at this time?
It's very difficult to say, but it looked like 150 to 200 yards. It was more or less hovering at this stage.
Could you see a shape at this stage?
No, just a massive light.
And what about colours? Was it red or white or?
An orange and crimson light, which seemed to be coming more from the top of the object, which was, the whole thing was surrounded then by a mass of bluish fog or vapour.
Well, what did you think it was?
Well, I did think it was some, I won't say flying saucer, some identified object, something I had never seen before, something unnatural.
But the Shelleys weren't the only witnesses to this strange object. A young woman named Ellen O'Donnell also reported seeing the mysterious object that very same evening.
I saw this strange object. I can't over there, and
What colour was it, Ellen?
oh, every color, orange, crimson. I think there were a slight,
There were lights coming out of it.
no, not exactly.
What shape was it, would you say?
Just
Was it-
more round than anything else, I'd say.
Like the Shelleys, Ellen could find no conventional explanation for what she'd seen as the glowing object disappeared into the darkness above the Tipperary countryside. It left behind a story that would linger within the community for years. Whether the Mullaghorn sighting was the result of an unusual atmospheric phenomenon, unknown aircraft, or something more enigmatic remains unresolved. What is certain, however, is that for those who witnessed it, the encounter transformed an ordinary evening into a moment that challenged the boundaries of the known world. In the late 1970s, the remote western coastline became the setting for one of the country's most intriguing UFO mysteries. The event occurred near Valencia Island in County Kerry, a place already steeped in maritime history and famous for its Atlantic weather stations and communication facilities. On a clear night in 1977, personnel monitoring radar systems along the coast detected an unusual object moving through the Irish airspace. According to accounts, the radar operators observed a target behaving in ways that defied normal aviation patterns. The object appeared suddenly on the radar screen and began moving at extraordinary speeds across the region. What made the detection particularly unusual was the object's sudden shift in direction, changing course abruptly, almost as if it were zigzagging through the skies. Operators initially assumed the contact might be a military aircraft or a kind of atmospheric interference affecting the radar. However, attempts to identify the object proved unsuccessful. No known aircraft had filed flight plans in that area at that time, and the movements recorded on radar did not match the behavior of commercial or military planes at all. For several tense minutes, The object continued its erratic path before suddenly disappearing from the radar display entirely. Though the incident was never formally explained, it quietly circulated among aviation personnel and UFO researchers across Ireland. Valencia Island has long been an important observation point for weather monitoring, making radar activity in the region particularly well documented. So that's what makes this case so intriguing. Over the years, speculation has ranged from experimental aircraft to weather anomalies, atmospheric anomalies, or even unidentified craft passing through Irish airspace undetected. Whatever the true explanation may be, the Valencia Island radar event remains one of Ireland's lesser-known but deeply puzzling UFO mysteries. Hey guys, Ryan Sprague here from Somewhere in the Skies. The podcast has always been and always will be completely free for you to listen to, but creating it every week takes a lot of time, research, and resources. And to be honest, it's just never been free for me to create. That's why we built a few simple ways for you to help support the show and keep it going strong. You can join us over on Patreon or through Apple Premium. Both offer the same awesome perks: ad-free episodes, early access to new content, exclusive bonus shows, and even priority to ask our guests your listener questions. It's a quick and easy way to support what we do for just a few bucks a month. And right now, you can even try Patreon for free for a week to see if it's right for you. To learn more and to join, head over to patreon.com/somewhereskies. That's patreon.com/somewhereskies. Or hit that subscribe button right at the top of your Apple Podcast feed. Thank you so much for listening, for supporting, and as always, keep looking up. One of the most intriguing UFO landing reports in Ireland is said to have taken place in 1978 near Kerry, a small coastal town in County Kerry. Along the rugged Ivora Peninsula, Kerry sits along the Ring of Kerry, surrounded by mountains, farmland, and sweeping views of the ocean. In the late 1970s, the area was still deeply rural, with quiet roads and very little light pollution at night. It was in this calm, isolated landscape that several residents claimed to witness something extraordinary descending from the skies. According to locals, the incident began late one evening when residents noticed unusual lights appearing above the countryside just outside the town. Witnesses described a bright object slowly descending toward a nearby field, its glow visible from several vantage points in the area. At first, some assumed it might be an aircraft or helicopter approaching the coastline, but as the object came closer to the ground, it became clear that it did not resemble any conventional aircraft. Those who watched the event unfold described the object as circular or disc-shaped, emitting an intense white light that illuminated the surrounding terrain. The glow was bright enough to cast long shadows across nearby hedgerows and stone walls. Observers reported that the craft appeared to hover only a short distance above the ground, remaining perfectly still in the air for several moments. Some witnesses later recalled hearing a faint humming or vibrating sound coming from the object, though others insisted the encounter was marked by an unusual silence. Several people described the atmosphere around the field as strangely calm, as though the air itself had become still. This eerie quiet only added to the sense that something highly unusual was taking place. After hovering for several minutes, the object reportedly began to rise into the sky. The craft lifted slowly at first, maintaining its bright glow as it climbed upward. Then, without warning, it accelerated rapidly and shot into the sky, disappearing into the darkness within seconds. In the days that followed, the story spread quickly through Kildare. Investigators who later visited the field reportedly observed unusual markings on the ground. where the object was believed to have touched down. While skeptics have suggested that the event may have involved misidentified aircraft or natural phenomena, the Cahersiveen encounter continues to be cited by UFO researchers as one of Ireland's most compelling alleged landing cases, an unexplained moment when something unusual may have briefly touched down on Irish soil. That very same year, a quiet stretch of countryside in County Kildare became the setting for one of Ireland's most unusual UFO encounters. The witness was a forestry worker named Joe Coleman, a man accustomed to long hours outdoors and deeply familiar with the landscape he worked around every day. On that particular morning, as Coleman moved through farmland near the village of Moon, something in the otherwise ordinary landscape immediately caught his attention. Sitting in the open field ahead was an object that did not belong there. At first, Coleman's mind attempted to interpret the sight in practical terms. Perhaps it was a piece of farm machinery left behind, or a vehicle that had somehow wandered off the nearby road. But as he drew closer, those possibilities quickly began to collapse. The object appeared too clean, too structured, and too deliberate in its placement. What stood before him was a metallic craft resting in the field. Smooth and symmetrical, its surface seamless and lacking rivets, panels, or construction marks normally found on human-made machines. The craft did not appear damaged or crashed. Instead, it seemed to have been carefully set down, as though it had landed with complete control. While all of this was strange, it just got stranger. Coleman noticed movement near the craft, and soon he witnessed several figures standing beside it. These figures were humanoid in shape, upright with 2 arms, 2 legs, but their presence felt profoundly unnatural. Their movements appeared stiff and controlled, lacking the relaxed gestures typical of people working outdoors. These beings wore tight, uniform-like clothing that didn't resemble farm gear, casual attire, or any type of work clothing appropriate for Ireland. Everything about their behavior suggested purpose and coordination, as though they were engaged in some deliberate task beside the craft. As Coleman hesitated at a distance, uncertain whether to approach or retreat, one of the beings suddenly turned toward him. Though he couldn't clearly distinguish facial features, the shift in body language made it unmistakable that they had noticed his presence. Almost immediately after noticing Coleman, the craft began to emit a low vibrating hum that seemed to be building in intensity. The beings quickly rushed inside of the craft, and the object rose smoothly from the ground, lifting vertically into the bright daylight before gliding away across the countryside. And within moments, it had completely vanished into the skies. This deeply powerful experience would remain with Coleman for the rest of his life, a brief but unsettling moment in which something utterly foreign appeared in a place that had once seemed completely familiar. In February of 2001, rumors began circulating across Northern Ireland about a strange object that had reportedly fallen from the skies. The first whispers came from farming communities, where residents claimed to have seen a brilliant light streak across the night skies before disappearing somewhere beyond the distant hills. Some witnesses described a flash followed by a sudden silence, while others believed they had seen something descending rapidly toward the ground. As word spread through local towns and eventually into the broader UFO research community, speculation began to grow that something far more unusual than a simple meteor might have entered Irish skies that night. Within weeks, the story had traveled beyond local rumor and reached the attention of investigators who tracked UFO reports across Ireland and the United Kingdom. Researchers began contacting authorities, asking whether emergency services or military personnel had been dispatched to search for debris. According to some accounts, there were reports of unusual activity in certain rural areas shortly after the sighting, though details were scarce. The mystery only deepened when it became clear that official records regarding the incident were more than difficult to obtain. The event eventually reached the halls of government. During a session of the House of Lords in October of 2001, a question was formally raised about reports of UFOs. A question was formally raised about reports of an unidentified object crash in Northern Ireland earlier that year. A member of the House asked what search operations had taken place and whether authorities had recovered any sort of material. It was an unusual moment, as UFO sightings are rarely discussed openly in parliamentary proceedings. But the rumors had become persistent enough that the question demanded an answer. The response from government officials was brief and carefully worded. Rather than confirming or denying the event outright, the spokesman referred to correspondence between Army headquarters in Northern Ireland and civilian UFO researchers. A letter addressing the matter had reportedly been placed in the library of the House of Lords for reference. Beyond that, no detailed explanation was ever offered. No confirmation of a crash site, no mention of recovered debris, and no description of the object itself. The lack of transparency only intensified public curiosity. Without a clear explanation, speculation quickly filled the void. Some observers suggested the sighting could have been a meteor or space debris burning up in the atmosphere before fragments reached the ground. Others pointed out that Northern Ireland occasionally hosts military exercises, raising the possibility that the object might have been a classified aircraft or experimental technology. More than 2 decades later, the Northern Ireland crash remains unresolved. No confirmed wreckage was ever presented to the public, and the official correspondence referenced in Parliament revealed very little about what truly occurred. For UFO researchers, the case remains an intriguing footnote in Ireland's long history of unexplained aerial phenomena, a moment when something strange may have fallen from the skies, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a brief echo within the halls of government. In May of 2016, a man named Airfin Jones reported a deeply unsettling encounter along the quiet stretch of Tenyoke Road in County Armagh. The narrow road winds through farmland and hedgerows in a sparsely populated part of the countryside, a place where long stretches of silence and open landscape make an unexpected sight stand out immediately. It was here, in broad daylight, that Jones claimed he came upon a strange figure moving ahead of him along the roadside, something that instantly struck him as profoundly out of place. As he drew closer, the figure resolved into what Jones believed to be a creature rather than a human being. He described it as tall and gray in color, with an unusual body structure that was broad across the shoulders, but tapered down toward a much narrower waist. Its torso appeared rounded and muscular, suggesting a powerful physical build unlike anything he'd ever encountered before. Most remarkable, however, was that the being possessed a long tail that swung rhythmically behind it as it walked, a detail that immediately shattered any possibility that he was looking at an ordinary person. The creature appeared completely unclothed, its form fully visible in the daylight as it moved across the road. Jones watched as it walked for several moments before suddenly turning toward him. The being looked directly at Jones, creating an instant moment of eye contact that left him frightened and stunned. In that instant, he felt certain he was not observing anything remotely human. The entire experience lasted only around 10 seconds before the moment ended and the figure was no longer in view. Despite the extraordinary nature of the claim, Jones later spoke openly about the encounter, acknowledging that the story might sound unbelievable to others, yet he maintained that the experience was real and insisted he would never have come forward if he had not truly witnessed the creature standing there on that quiet stretch of road. To this day, the bizarre sighting remains one of the most unusual creature encounters ever reported in Northern Ireland, leaving lingering questions about what exactly may have crossed Jones's path that afternoon. In October of 2018, a quiet road in County Wicklow became the setting for one of Ireland's most intriguing modern UFO sightings. Wicklow, often referred to as Garden of Ireland, is known for its rolling hills, forested valleys, and winding back roads that stretched through farmland and small villages. On clear nights, away from the lights of Dublin, the sky over Wicklow can be remarkably dark and open, conditions that make unusual aerial phenomena especially noticeable. Late one evening, a woman named Ciara Gallagher was driving along one of these back roads on her way home when something unusual caught her attention. Looking up through her windshield, she noticed a set of bright lights hovering in the skies ahead of her. At first, she assumed they were lights of an approaching aircraft, or perhaps a helicopter operating somewhere in the distance. But as she continued driving, the lights began to behave in ways that quickly challenged her assumption. Rather than moving steadily across the skies like an aircraft on a flight path, the lights appeared to remain suspended in one area. They didn't blink like standard navigation lights, nor did they seem to drift in the wind like a lantern or balloon might. The formation itself is what truly puzzled Gallagher. 3 large lights appeared to form a triangular pattern, high above the countryside. At moments, the lights seemed to shift positions, briefly blending together in a single brighter glow before separating again into the triangular configuration. The movement was smooth and deliberate, unlike the erratic motion of drones or the predictable trajectory of planes. Triangular-shaped UFOs have been reported around the world for decades and are often described as large, silent craft, capable of hovering motionless before accelerating rapidly. While skeptics have suggested the Wicklow sighting could have involved drones or distant aircraft, Gallagher maintained that the lights did not behave like anything she'd ever seen before. And like many UFO sightings in Ireland, the Wicklow Triangle remains unexplained, a brief but striking encounter with something unusual in the Irish skies. In the early morning hours of November 9th, 2018, a routine transatlantic flight approaching Ireland experienced something that would quickly become one of the most widely discussed UFO incidents in the country's history. The event unfolded high above the Atlantic Ocean, just southwest of the Irish coastline. At approximately 6:45 a.m., the pilot of British Airways Flight 94, traveling from Montreal to London Heathrow, contacted air traffic control at Shannon Airport. The pilot asked a simple but unusual question. Was there any military activity taking place in the area? The controllers replied that there was nothing showing on radar. The pilot then described what had just occurred. A bright light had appeared alongside the aircraft before suddenly accelerating away at tremendous speeds. According to the pilot, the object moved so quickly that it disappeared from sight within seconds. The light had approached the aircraft from the left side and then shot off to the north. Moments later, another aircraft entered the conversation. The crew of Virgin Atlantic Flight 76, traveling from Orlando to Manchester, reported seeing the same phenomenon. They described 2 bright lights that seemed to bank to the right before climbing rapidly away. A third flight crew also confirmed witnessing strange lights moving through the skies. One pilot described the speed of the object as astronomical, estimating that the lights may have been traveling at Mach 2 or faster, roughly twice the speed of sound. The lights appeared briefly, maneuvered sharply, and then vanished. Despite the presence of multiple witnesses in separate aircraft, the objects never appeared on radar. Here is actual audio from those calls.
Channel 394.
Go ahead.
Any military strategy got right now?
Okay, sir, there's nothing showing on either primary or secondary.
Okay, it was moving so fast, it's like you can no longer see it, but yes, that's good.
Alongside you?
Yes. It to come up on our left-hand side and then rapidly veer to the north, being so bright light, and then it disappeared at a very high speed. I'm still just wondering. We didn't think it was likely to live before, so just wondering what that could have been.
Meteor or another object making some kind of re-entry. Appears to be multiple objects following the same sort of trajectory. Very bright from where we were.
Okay, that's copied. And is there a direction it was going in or anything? Right, it's copied, thank you.
The Virgin 76 also saw that in our 11 o'clock position. Two bright lights.
Roger, that's copied, thank you.
Glad it wasn't just me. No, yeah, very interesting, that one. Virgin 76. I saw two bright lights, 11 o'clock, seem to back over to the right and then climb away at speed, at least.
Okay, we're passing that on now, thank you.
Speedbird 94, Shannon.
94, Dennis.
Okay, just so you know that other aircraft in the air have also reported the same thing, so we're going to have a look and see.
The Irish Aviation Authority later investigated the incident, but ultimately labeled the case inconclusive. Some astronomers suggested the lights may have been fragments of a meteor burning through the atmosphere. However, several observers pointed out that meteors typically follow straight trajectories and did not suddenly change direction. For many UFO researchers and aviation observers, the Shannon pilot encounter remains one of the most compelling modern UFO sightings ever recorded over Ireland. Ireland has always been a place where myth and mystery exist side by side. And like the island's folklore of yesterday and the UFO stories of today, they are woven into Ireland's living history. Today, the language may have changed, but the experiences throughout the centuries sound strikingly similar. Pilots report brilliant objects racing past their aircraft. Witnesses describe glowing spheres hovering silently over fields or drifting above the ocean. Radar operators detect targets that move in ways no aircraft should. So when these modern encounters are placed alongside the older stories, it becomes very difficult not to notice the parallels. Perhaps these events are simply misidentified natural phenomena or misunderstood human technology. But it's also possible that something more mysterious has been appearing in Ireland's skies for far longer than we could ever realize. In a country where ancient folklore still echoes through the hills and the valleys, the boundary between legend and reality has always been a little harder to define. So, this St. Patrick's Day, while the world celebrates the culture and traditions of Ireland, take just a moment to look up at the night skies, because above the green fields, the ancient ruins, and the dark waters of the ocean, the mystery may still be unfolding. And somewhere in those skies, the next unexplained encounter may already be waiting. Please take a moment to rate and review Somewhere in the Skies on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us gain visibility and find new listeners. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and turn on notifications. All of our socials are in the show notes, along with links to my articles, our merch shop, and to our Patreon page. Your support truly makes a difference. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, keep your feet on the ground, but never stop searching somewhere in the skies.
Somewhere in the Skies is part of the Somewhere podcast universe. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. To learn more about all of our shows, visit thespu.com.
Spectrovision Radio.